Interpreting rates, lesson 6. We're going to explore unit rates today. Our I can choose unit rate to use based on how I plan to solve the problem. And when I have a ratio, I can calculate its 2 unit rates and explain what each of them means in the situation. So make sure you have today's date, your ICANS, and page number, and you're all set. So we talked about in the ICANS about unit rates. What does per mean? What is something that you've heard that said something per something? Probably heard something like that gasoline at the gas station was like $1.79 per gallon. May have heard something like, let's say, got tomatoes at the store. It was $3 per pound. Those are probably some places that you've heard the word per used with something. And it's usually something that has to do with a unit rate. And so we're going to explore that a little bit more here with looking at some ratio stuff here with some cooking of oatmeal. So Priya, Han, Lynn, and Diego are all on a camping trip with their families. First morning, Priya and Han make oatmeal for the group. The instructions for a large batch say bring 15 cups of water to a boil and then add 6 cups of oats. Priya says the ratio of cups of oats to the cups of water is 6 to 15. That's 4/10 cup of oats per cup of water. Han says the ratio of cups of water to cups of oats is 15 to 6. That's 2.5 cups of water per cup of oats. Who's right? Well, let's find out. So to go from 15 down to 1, we have to divide by 15, right? So Priya said that there's 4/10 cups of oats per cup of water. So she divided 6 by 15 and got 4/10. And Han says that the ratio is 15 to 6 and that it's 2.5 cups of water per 1 cup of oats. Well, does that work? Is this still correct? Who's right? Both of them, really, right? Just depends on how you're reading it. They've read both the same ratio, however, they labeled it differently so that it almost sounds different. But in reality, they're actually coming up with the same thing. Because if you think about it, if I take 1 times 2 and 5/10, I'm going to get 2 and 5/10. If I take 4/10 times 2 and 5/10, I'm going to actually get 1 whole. So both of those are the right thing. It's just that one is looking at the per cups of water, and the other one is looking at cups per of water per cup of oats. So it's the same thing. It's just looking at it in 2 different ways. Next weekend, after the camping trip, Lynn and Diego decided to cook the large batch of oatmeal for breakfast for the whole week. Lynn decides to cook 5 cups of oats. How many cups of water should she boil? Well, 5 cups of oats, and she wants to find out how many cups of water. Looks like since we're starting with the cups of oats, we need to work back and find what the cups of water would be. So this would be kind of the same that we talked about before, in that we want to know the number of, or for per 1 cup of oats, we want to find the water. So 5 times 1 gets us the 5, right? So we have to take the 2 and 5/10 times 5, Yeah. 12 5/10 or 12.5 cups of water. What about Diego? Gonna boil 10 cups of water. How many cups of oats does he need? Now we're going to be using what Priya had said before, because we're starting with the water, and so we already can see the 10 to 1, or 10 times 1 gets us this 10 here. So we just have to multiply that 4 by 10, which gets us 4 whole, right? Or 40/10 when we multiplied it out. So how did those each help? How did Priya's and Hans' rates help us with these? Well, we had a 1 per. We had a single part there that we could easily use to jump to those other parts. And then by using what we multiplied those parts to make, so like the 5, the 1 times 5 gave us that 5. We had to multiply the 2 1/2 or 2 5/10 times 5, and then that gave us our answer. We used the opposite part on this one, but it still worked out the same way. Sorry about that sound. It was my stepson startling my wife. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. Cheesecake, milk, and raffle tickets. We're not going to go too deep in all of these. So in that last one, we were talking about how 15 cups of water for every 16 cups of oats, and we could write it 2 different ways. We could talk about 4/10 cups of oats per cup of water, or 2.5 cups of water per cup of oats. And this is where we're talking about unit rate. So make sure you jot this down specifically. You can add the other part, for example, if you'd like. So unit rate is the rate per 1 of something. Just like we talked about just a second ago. It's the 4/10 cups of oats per 1 cup of water. 2.5 cups of water per cup of oats. So the unit rate is just that something with a 1 with it. It's just like when we talked about unit fractions in previous grade levels. A unit fraction was any fraction that had a 1 for a numerator. Unit rate is the same thing, except that the unit rate can be on either side. It can be used in however you need to make your problem solving go the best. So you may use a unit rate the same one time, and someone might use it a different way and still come up with the same answer. Kind of like with what we just talked about with all 4 of those kids making their oatmeal breakfast for everybody in 2 different ways. So it really just kind of depends on what works best for the situation. Okay, we're not going to go through every one of these, so hang on just a second. In fact, let's just do one practice one real quick here. So a cheesecake recipe calls for mixing 12 ounces of cream cheese with 15 ounces of sugar. How many ounces of cream cheese are there for each ounce of sugar? Well, we know that there's 12 of the cream cheese, 12 ounces of it for each 15 ounces of sugar, right? First one wants to know how many ounces of cream cheese are there for every 1 ounce of sugar. So we have to take the 12 and divide it by 15, right? Remember that fractions are just another way to write division. So we can actually just make this 12 divided by 15. We can just reduce this fraction, divide both those by 3. It's 4/5 of an ounce of cream cheese per 1 cup or per 1 ounce of sugar. You could also make this into the decimal of 8/10. That still works. What about this other one where it says how many ounces of sugar is there for every ounce of cream cheese? Now we're talking about the other way, aren't we? Now we want 1 ounce of cream cheese per how many ounces of sugar per 1 ounce of cream cheese. So actually, we're kind of thinking about this the other way. So hang on a second, let me fix that. You wouldn't necessarily have to write it this opposite direction, but it does help with understanding that you were saying per. Okay. So this case, we're taking the 15 and now dividing it by 12. 12 will go into 15 one time. You get 3 left over, so you get 1 3/12, or 1 1/4 ounces of the sugar to 1 ounce of the cream cheese. You could also think of 1/4 is still the same as 1 25/100, isn't it? Because if you divide 4 into 1, you get 25/100. So it's a 1 25/100 to 1 as well. So this is just how you're coming up with per. Per is just finding a single one of one part of the ratio and then finding out how that other part of the ratio relates back to that one. Here in the blue, we were talking about ounces of sugar to 1 ounce of per ounce of cream cheese. Here we were talking about ounces of cream cheese per ounce of sugar. So any ratio has 2 associated unit rates, and those unit rates can be calculated efficiently with a single operation, either multiplication or division. And depending on the problem that you want to solve, one unit rate might be more useful than the other, just like we talked about before. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for to solve with it. All right, we are all set. Thanks for watching.